many are still grieving. Some families will be lost to one another forever. To those of you who face the difficulties of reconnecting with family and establishing ongoing relationships, we say sorry. We offer this apology in the hope that it will assist your healing and in order to shine a light on a dark period of our nation's history. To those who have fought for the truth to be heard, we hear you now.
You're listening to Adopt Perspective podcast, a podcast for anyone affected by adoption. I'm your host and president of Jigsaw Queensland, Jo Sparrow. This podcast is a production of Jigsaw Queensland Post-Adoption Support Service. However, the views expressed are those of the people participating and not necessarily Jigsaw Queensland. The podcast discusses adult themes and listener discretion is advised. Hi everyone and welcome to Adopt Perspective. I'm your host, Jo Sparrow, president of Jigsaw Queensland. Today's guest is someone whose work is reshaping how we think about adoption, identity and intimacy. Anna Linde is an adoptee, a dance and movement therapist, a sexology researcher, and the founder of the Adopted Sexologist. Her work focuses on the often unspoken intersections between adoption, sexuality, race, and belonging. Exploring how adopted people, especially transracial adoptees, experience the body, desire, and self. Anna's writing is rich, provocative, and deeply grounded in lived experience. And whether you've read her article, Unfolding Our Sexual Identity as Black Adoptees, discovered her through the Adopted Sexologist platform, or come across her research in scholarly journals, you'll know that she's bringing vital and often invisible conversations into the light. Anna, welcome to Adopt Perspective. I'm so grateful to have you here.
Thank you. I sound like this amazing person.
Because you are an amazing person.
It's just when you hear it, it's like, yeah, man, that makes sense.
So, Anna, I thought to begin with, would you mind sharing a little of your own adoption story, where and how you were adopted and how it shaped your early understanding of identity?
Yeah, I guess that makes a lot of sense from every perspective. And I'm born in Salvador, in Bahia, in Brazil. And I'm raised in Sweden with my white parents, which creates a lot of interesting intersections between who you are and with what other people assume or who other people assume that you are. Mm-hmm. And it's a lot about Salvador is the Afro capital in Brazil for a lot of different reasons. So there's a lot of Black people in Salvador. But when you come to Brazil, to Rio or to Natal or some of the other cities, then it's not necessarily so enriched with Black culture. And I didn't know that until I came back when I was 15 or something, because it's like visiting a different part of Brazil than the rest. And that was totally new for me as well.
Yeah, I bet it was. Were there moments growing up when you were especially aware of your racial or cultural difference from your adoptive family and surroundings?
Yeah, like all the time, I would say. It was more a normal thing to not necessarily feel I was melting in properly, or it was so easy to just be me because I was usually the only Black person or the only Black child as well in our family gatherings or in school or school meetings and these type of things. So I think being othered became much more normal for me than what I would love it to be in general for people. And maybe because of that, I have the spotlight or the gaze differently wired in my head than for other people. But I guess a lot of transracial adoptees can relate to that.
Yeah. I mean, it makes me think of like things from, my perspective as a domestic adoptee. I often felt my difference in amongst all of my family, but other people didn't necessarily notice my difference. So it was something I felt from inside, but they didn't notice for me, but it would be a very different experience for you.
Yeah, but still, and then it's interesting when you say it, because the question is maybe then what is the best? Yeah, best, but like what would be the safest depending on which age we are in and the context. Because I bet that it feels even more complicated to know that you're different and you feel it, but nobody else see it. And then it can probably, become a thought in your head like, is it only me? Or like, why is it like that? Compared to my experience where it was like, it has to be this, actually. Like, this is what it is, which is also not true every time, But yeah.
Yeah, incredibly complex. So, how did your early experiences influence your path into therapeutic and academic work?
I think, I don't know if every therapist would say this, but I think a lot of us would say that we needed to understand something that nobody else understood about ourselves. Which I did was a strong, motivational factor for why I studied. I went from doing social work to study counseling, and then to study dance and movement therapy, and then to sexology. Because it's constantly felt like I had a different experience than what was described or what was the official experience of things. And I couldn't figure out what it was, except for, diving deeper in what is actually going on in the interaction between people, but also what is actually going on inside of me that nobody seems to be able to catch. Um, and also the longing for feeling healed, like the longing for actually being able to access and live the life that I had, that I was given, that the opportunities that came with being a transracial adoptee in my case. Um, and I just felt that I couldn't access all of that anyway. I was anyway not, amazingly happy or grateful. And I couldn't really figure out why that was the case, because I saw a lot of things. It didn't mirror how I was feeling inside.
Yeah, I completely relate to that because I think my last 11 years of work and academic life have been focused on that as well. And even my work with Jigsaw, even though it's helping other people, that in turn helps me and helps me understand myself. Conversations like this, I'm learning things all of the time. Yeah, so it's interesting how many of us have our experiences lead into pathways that help others, but in turn help us.
Yeah, because healing is only happening in community or in relationships. It doesn't happen when we are alone, because we cannot heal alone or like in a vacuum. But I'm also thinking it's again about being mirrored or not. Because if you can mirror somebody else in a situation that's more challenging or painful than the one you are in now, that's creating empathy. And the more empathy we have and we can give, it's a win. I mean, yeah, empathy is a win always.
Yeah.
Um, but I'm not sure. Like, it's not all the time when I'm studying or when I have been studying that I'm 100% reliant on, the information we get or the theories we work with or the books that we read. And I'm like, I'm not sure this is actually how it is for us, though. Like, I'm not sure this is exactly how it is for adoptees.
Yeah. A
Um,
bit niche, isn't it? There's like some other avenues and unfortunately not explored enough.
yeah, that's usually the feeling actually for me as well.
Yeah. So your article, Unfolding Our Sexual Identity as Black Adoptees, is powerful and deeply personal. What led you to begin exploring this intersection between race, adoption, and sexuality?
So I think the main thing for me when I was getting a divorce, and I was sitting at home a Friday night with a glass of wine, and I was like, what the hell? Like, how did this happen? What should I do? Who am I? Like all of these big questions that you can obviously not solve with a glass of wine Friday evening. Um, but I was feeling lost in a way that was new. It was not new, but it was also new, because I suddenly realized that I forgot everything that was about me and what I liked and what is important for me, and what was the things I wanted to do, because I've been so busy in being a parent and being a wife or whatever. Um, and I realized that I've always been interested in sex and sexology. Not necessarily the practice of sex, but it's always been a thing, an attraction, an intimacy, and sensuality. And like, it felt like it was a world that I didn't really could grasp. And especially with giving birth a couple of years earlier, which I have two kids. My youngest one is born in a home birth without stuff there. So what do you call it? Like, uh, no, no midwives, no nothing. Like it was just me and some white chocolate and Spotify in my partner.
Wow.
Yeah, and that was really a strong experience. In so many ways that are, so related to sexual health and sexuality and reproductive health and rights and so on and so on. So when I was sitting there drinking wine and considering my life, I was like, can you study sex? How do you do that? It's like, oh, you can actually. Like it's a master program. It's like, I'm going to do that. So I brought that situation in when I was doing my master thesis. And like, is it just me really? Like, or is this a thing that's nobody really had time to look at closer? Because if I'm raised with white parents and my gaze from that experience is more white, because everything I see around me is white, then how will that affect the people I choose to date? And what happens with me if this is how I choose? I think that was the question that started.
That's I mean, that's fascinating. And I'm just thinking about how as adopted people, it is very difficult, I think, for us to figure out who we are and what we like. For years I couldn't have told you what my favorite colors were and what things I was into, and it's only in the last, again, maybe the last 11 years that I've started to populate my house and myself with things that I've figured out that I like that are separate off from my adoptive family and their interests. And it's been real work to do that. It's been very challenging, but also very healing. And unfortunately, the sort of more steps back I take from my adoptive family, the closer I seem to get to myself, which is a bit strange, but maybe not so strange at all when you think about it.
Yeah, it's like you're saying, it's strange, but it's also not strange because we're supposed to, create a distance and become ourselves as a, with normal development, whatever we want to call it, when we are teenagers and so on. And we're supposed to do that all the time, bit by bit. We're exploring and we are going further out and we are, becoming ourselves. But it's not surprising at all, though, that feels different and it comes with a different price with our kind was, I almost said, well, our kind, because of our early experience of already being relinquished or already losing that extremely important connection.
Mm.
So it feels like it's a lifelong exploration to find yourselves. And I'm also thinking that we in general we make a mistake when we talk about identity as one thing, because the more I unfold around sexual identity and sexuality, it's like it's not one thing, it's fluid. It's changing through life, and our ideas about it change, our what we're attracted to change, what we want to have or not change. And then maybe it doesn't really make sense to talk about it like one thing. But we have many layers of social identities, and our sexual identity is one of those things that just
Yeah.
there in different ways.
When I was rereading, all of our preparation for this conversation this morning, I was thinking back to when I was probably a young teenager, and I had an older adoptive brother who was not adopted. He was biological to my parents. He was 14 years older, and he moved in with his girlfriend. So this would have been back in the early 80s, maybe, when that was still not that common, that people would live together before they were married. And I
Right.
remember my adopted mother saying to him, look, I can live with the fact that you're going to be living together outside of marriage. I get that's what people are starting to do, but please, please don't ever have a child outside of marriage. Please promise me you won't do that. And I remember at the time thinking, oh, I was born outside of a marriage, and what does that mean about me? And then like the terror I found as I went into my teens about what if I fell pregnant outside of marriage, and what would that mean? And all of those things spoke a lot to how I viewed sex and my body and autonomy, and how other people viewed it and me. So there's a lot to unpack, isn't there, as we start to grow and re-examine all of those influences.
And it becomes, you used such a good word a couple of minutes ago, which I don't remember right now, but something about bringing in the things that you like, or like, don't remember. It was a great word. And I think this is the same. Like when we hear something, or when we are challenged with something, or when somebody is giving us comments like that, then those things become voices inside of us ourselves as well. And not always making it easier to navigate life or to navigate ourselves or anything, obviously. But for me, I had the exact same situation when I was 14 or 15. But I made an abortion in that age because I got pregnant by, not in a way that was making sense. And then, now when I say that doesn't make sense, well, that's my adult brain that is saying that it didn't make sense. But how it felt in my body was that it was the only thing that made sense at that point. And I think a lot of us are just trying to find our way home. Like trying to find out where is my shadows? How do they look? What is going on here? What am I carrying? And how do I actually find it? Because I don't see it from here. So when we get a crumb of something that we recognize, or a crumb of something we really need to unfold, then we might grasp it. It's just that it might not be the best strategy to figure it out.
Gosh, I almost don't want to ask the next question. I want to sit and think about all of that.
Yeah, but it is a lot to think about. And when you're doing it, or from my perspective, when you're trying to understand that, or when you're trying to find your shadow or your tail or whatever, then what do you really have to navigate with? The norms in society, the rules in your family, the expectations from your like your adoptive mom said, or your mom said, that make sure that you're not getting pregnant. Okay, that's one narrative then, or one truth. But then how is that helping you, with your special story and your special background and your special life? Like maybe it's not helping you. And then how will we know? Like, how do you navigate life when the things that are said might not be in your best interest, but in the society's, or for somebody else's reputation? Or it's a tricky black hole to be stuck in from time to time.
Yeah. So you describe the silencing or invisibility of the racialized body in adoption narratives, particularly in relation to desire and sexual identity. Can you speak to what that silence feels like for adoptees?
Yeah, because it's a very weird either or thing in many situations, in many countries, or in many for many people. Because so when I was raised in Sweden, which is a very colorblind society, then nobody can talk about color or race because they don't see race or color, meaning that they are not racist. And this was this is the truth, or the Swedish narrative about it. But that means that a big part of me is invisible, though. So even if, and of course people do, have a relationship to the idea of color, or the idea of ethnicity, or the idea of race, even if it's not relating to me personally. Because if I am the only Black person or Black child that enters a store, then I'm visible. And then it doesn't matter if somebody's telling me that, we don't see color, we're not racist. No, but I am visible, though. That's what it is, end of story. But to have that ignored in sexual situations, or in intimate meetings, or in in dating just made me realize that it's officially invisible until we are alone. Then it's not invisible at all. Then it's a thing instead. And it could be a tool or a thing that makes me, sexualized or objectified from the other person in a way that I wasn't prepared for, because nobody talked with me about it, because nobody sees color. So I think for many of us, it is an either or thing, that it's been invisible officially until we start to date, or we're not starting to date, where it's like, no, I'm not turned on by you, or your hair or your body, or whatever things it is, because we don't look like our other peers that we are raised with, maybe. Or it could be, oh, I love your almond shaped eyes, or your chocolate brown, these things that are just sounds like compliments. They are not compliments. But the younger you are, you're like, oh, thank you, I think. And then you're like, well, wait, or does it feel like thank you? But nobody's, helping you out to figure that out, what to do with it. Also, nobody wants somebody else to feel uncomfortable. So it can also be hard for parents or whatever to like, hey, that comment doesn't make any sense, don't say it.
Yeah. And probably, I'm just thinking off the top of my head here, but white parents of a transracial adopted child, probably if they're thinking from that lens of, I don't see color, they don't want to talk about that, because then it's the elephant in the room, isn't it? I do see color, and I am dressing the difference.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And of course, nobody wants to be called a racist. And that wasn't the point either. But if somebody constantly is ignoring the fact that I'm Black, even though I'm dressed up like a doll to be visible in social context, for example, then it matters though. Like it does matter, because the more visible I am, even if people say that I'm not visible, the more the more dangerous is that for me as a child, because there are predators and not especially nice and cute adults everywhere in the world. So for me, it doesn't make sense that we don't talk about it, but rather, how is race or ethnicity a thing in this situation or not? And it might not be a thing, but it might also be a thing. Because even if you don't make a thing out of it, for example, because you simply meet so many people everywhere, so it doesn't, that's not a thing that you talk about or that makes sense for you to focus on. But for somebody who is deeply traumatized by the fact that they are always been othered or always been visible based on their skin color, then for them it might be really traumatic to have a conversation with you, for example, even though it has nothing to do with you personally. So I think the question, like, how does race or skin color affects us, or in which ways, would make more sense than for somebody to, always jump to say, oh, but I don't see color.
Yeah.
I'm not racist.
What's jumping out at me about this conversation is how important informed support services are when these situations, when transracial adoption is happening. The importance of being able to address these things and have conversations right from the get-go, and not being blind to them, is just so important. So important.
Yeah, and I don't know why, because it's like people have this idea about sex, which I don't think is so consciously expressed. But I think if we talk about sex and people get nervous, because people do in general, it's a tricky topic to address for many people. I talk about it all day long, so whatever. But if you get nervous when we talk about it, for whatever reason, you being nervous, it's a very similar experience in your body to be aroused or to be sexually aroused. So I think many people also feel very uncomfortable being nervous talking about sex with their partners, with their teenagers, with whoever it is, because they actually think that they are getting aroused.
Right. Yeah.
They absolutely don't want to be aroused talking about sex with their kids.
Yeah.
A perfectly good translation of why you're blocking it out, but it doesn't mean that you are like, it's not the same. That you're nervous and that you're aroused is not the same, but anxiety is a high arousal state in your body, and so is sexual arousal. It's very easy to accidentally mix them up.
Yeah, that makes sense. So you also mentioned the idea of the desexualized good adoptee, inverted commas, versus the hypersexualized, racialized body. How do these conflicting narratives show up in the lives of transracial adoptees?
In a lot of ways, because if somebody feels or thinks that they need to kill themselves in a way to be accepted and to stay in that family or in that context, or showing up as they should, then they might also kill the urge or the desire or the passion for exploring themselves, for exploring sexuality, for going into the zone of being naughty or being whatever norms that are in that time and in that society. But also because of the ideas of the stereotypes, the sexual stereotypes around racialized bodies, where Black women in general are very, we're very aggressive, or we're always ready, or those type of ideas, compared to, for example, Asian men, which you basically cannot even sexualize because their bodies are made unmasculine or like demasculine. And then how do you sexualize somebody that's not even allowed to have their own sexual expression? So there's a lot of these stereotypes that we navigate all the time. We just don't realize how much they're affecting us. But how often do you see photos or models or images of men from Asia? And it's like, that's maybe not the most common thing we see. Also, if you think about pornography, like, is that a category even? And then how is it for that category of men to find their own voice and their own inspiration and their own sexual expression, when the whole society is totally opposite, might be totally opposite?
Yeah.
So there's a lot of things around this that makes it hard for us to really understand who we are when we're growing up in this. Because of course, if you are a transracial adoptee, a man from Asia, then how will your white adoptive parents talk with you about this? Because they don't know.
Yeah.
We figure these things out along the way, and then suddenly when we're almost 40, we're like, oh, okay, now I get it. Because of course it's hard, and of course you cannot talk with anyone about something you don't know, but you can at least be a bit supportive in navigating it. Because if everybody has the right and the longing for relationships and connection and exploring your sex life and so on, well, then it's a sign to you, then you should address that with your child. And that's maybe the sign you should take.
So, what kind of spaces or conversations do you think we need to create for adoptees to safely explore their bodies, boundaries, and identities?
So I think it depends on the age, I would say, because from early age, our parents and caregivers are the role models in how we navigate consent and boundaries. And we do it in our ordinary daily situations everywhere. When we're eating, what kind of clothes are we wearing? When are we leaving? Are you ready? Like, you knock on somebody's door, you don't just enter. Like, all of these things are parts of our upbringing, which shapes the ideas of what we have, or what is accepted or not, and what is okay or not, and how well somebody's listening to me when I say no or not. And I think if we would be aware of how important those things are from the start. And also, I would love for parents to talk more about this together. like sit down together and talk about consent and boundaries. Because of course we learn by listening to others, and it's not easy to understand all of the things either. But because it's different, because, adoptive parents did not, carry that child and give birth to it, then it is a different process of understanding who belongs to who. Like, how melted together are we or not? How much space should we have when I'm longing for more, or the opposite? And like, it's tricky things to identify, but it doesn't mean that my child should have the door open to the room all the time because I want access. That's not the same. And sometimes we need to hear somebody say that out loud for us to like, oh, right, shit, actually, they don't relate. And it's like, no, they don't. And then good, we can drop that and we can do something else. But again, then you have the shame. So, if I would ask you to think about a word that is related to sex or your period or your body, that you're like, I cannot even say this word out loud. Like, don't ask me to say it. Then that word or the idea you have about that word might be blocking you from even having conversations with your children. And I usually ask parents that, like, what are your scary words? And they're like, I don't have any. And I'm like, well, okay, so now you're recording and you're planning to have this. So I'm not going to say those words. But otherwise I say it out loud, here and there. And you can see on people when they're like, like, oh, don't make me say it. And I'm like, oh, but it's interesting. How come that word is so scary for you? And then it usually has this, my mom couldn't say it, or this was the ugliest word my dad could, or whatever. But it's like, okay, is that what's blocking you from having a proper conversation? Then maybe you should practice in using that word. Or maybe you should just use another word, like it's just, let's figure it out instead of having these major blockages of things that doesn't make sense. And also, if you have that level of anxiety or stress or feeling that level of shame for a word, then of course you will avoid conversation. How would you have a conversation about sex if you cannot use the words that you need to use?
It's I've obviously been thinking so much. I've been very excited to have this conversation with you. And so much so that I think it invaded my sleep last night and I had a dream. It was actually a disturbing dream. This is not a disturbing conversation, but it was a disturbing dream. And it was kind of based on the reality of my childhood. And something that really I woke up with feeling was how it felt like as an adoptee, my body didn't belong to me when I was in my adoptive family. And I remember my adoptive mother was, so I'm a person who doesn't crave a lot of physical attention, touch and that kind of stuff. And if I need comfort, I've turned in, which probably is a lot of adopted people, rather than looking out, because there was no one out, when we were infants. But my adoptive mother was somebody who desperately craved physical attention and love, and who would constantly be grabbing me forcibly into hugs and making me kiss her, or saying, just kiss me, just hug me, and it would actually feel like burning on my skin. It was so uncomfortable. It felt horrible to the point where I would want to push her off, but I couldn't. So I felt I had no boundaries, and it stayed with me and has impacted my life in many ways afterwards. Is that something you come across in your practice with adopted people, that they kind of don't feel like they own their body because of their experience?
All the time.
Yeah.
This is the main problem. All the time. And there is so many similar situations and stories to what you just told. And also because, you feel that you cannot push them away, because to what price are you rejecting them? What will happen?
Yeah.
And how will that be if you do that officially, for example? What will happen when you come home? And it's when love and unconditional love, which we are supposed to have as children because we need it for our survival, has been, invaded by a transactional team, or a transactional energy or transactional points, then of course it shifts everything else as well, because it's implying a different framework for how our relationship works. And then how will I know if my body is for me or not? Because somebody just bought it also. Like, it's like, it doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
And I mean, only carrying that fear around probably also makes a difference for us in what we are saying no or not to officially or like out loud. But of course, also the fact that if somebody is, craving physical contact to that extent, they're probably also not reading the room properly. Because if she would have read the room and saw you before she, grabbed you, then she would like, oh shit, oh, I'm sorry. Like I didn't realize. Like I really wanted a hug. Like I just realized that's not what you want to do right now. Sorry.
Yeah.
And then, it would have been a different interaction and you would have felt more like your boundaries were acknowledged, even if she didn't get what she needed. But to be an adoptee or to have an adoptee body can for many people be like, no, my body is not for me, actually. Like it's never was for me. I wasn't even wished for. How could it be for me? And then it puts a very, very tricky emotional or mental prison for many of us when it comes to consent and boundaries, because how do you consent to something when you couldn't consent to anything so far?
Yeah. Ooh.
Yeah, and it's like, because we're pinpointing, how do you find home in your body then? Like, who am I? Where do I begin and end? And can I ever find myself? Like, do I have the right to exist in my own ways? Like we're pinpointing all of those things and questions in the same time. And for everybody, for anyone listening, doesn't matter what kind of reaction they get, but I would really suggest that take a deep breath and sit with it, because it's information. No, we don't need to jump to any conclusion, but like this is information. And you're getting information now from yourself, from your signals, from how triggered or sad or upset or annoyed or whatever it is that you're feeling. Now we can look at what is the function of what you're feeling. We don't need to react. We don't need to, jump anywhere, but like, what is this reaction telling you right now? And you can write that down, or you can, save that, and then we can visit that again. That's what I would suggest that people do.
Thank you. Thank you. So what inspired you to start the Adopted Sexologist, and how has that space evolved?
Thanks, of course. No, okay. But so by the way, working with sex is like the best, because you can always make people uncomfortable with bad jokes everywhere in the world. But also I think for me personally, there is so much around sexual liberation and like the erotic self and embodiment that makes me feel empowered in myself, in how I walk, in how I dress, in how I approach my day or whatever it is. And I just, because that's the place where I feel empowered most of the times, then it's also been a place where I learned so much about myself, and so much about myself in this type of body that I'm in. So I think creating that space, doing what I do, is because I think finding that empowerment and unfolding, the layers of shame and ideas and norms and whatever that's going on upon our sexual identities or sexual desires, I think it could be helpful for a lot of people. So I've just been trying to hold some space for different thoughts from different things that would make sense, and trying to be more visible, just so we can, just shake things a bit and see what's actually going on. Because like you said, it's like you have to find yourself all the time. Wait, what I'd say, you said it, I don't remember. But like we need to find ourselves and we need to navigate it. But like, yeah, how would we navigate our sexuality and desires in this crazy world with all the pornography and stereotypes and people who doesn't respect boundaries and shame, because we already feel shame around our bodies. A lot of us do, for a million different reasons. And how can we release that so that we're not walking the world in this, strong sense of I'm not accepted, I don't belong, I don't, I don't have the right to speak up, and so on.
Yeah, that's great. So in your therapeutic and group work, what are some of the themes that consistently arise for adopted clients navigating intimacy, embodiment, and sexual identity?
Oh, so I would say intimacy in general is a topic where I appreciate to spend more time with, because how many different ways do my clients have to access intimacy? And how many ways would they like to have? And what does intimacy mean? Like, what does that mean if somebody's giving them something or somebody is sharing something? What makes that conversation or that meeting into an intimate meeting or not? And to look closer at those things, like vulnerability, for example, or connection. What does it mean to have a connection? And what I usually return to is to remind, well, everybody I meet actually, to remind people of that you need to have a connection to yourself first. And you need to feel that you are grounded or anchored and that you are, walking the world pretty steady in yourself. So you need to find home in your own body. And if you don't, then, how would you actually know what you're supposed to choose or what direction you're supposed to go? Because if you're not home in your body, then how will you know how to find your gut feeling or your intuition, which is supposed to guide you? And like, how do you do that? And it sits very well with adoptees because it's maybe more of, like an old wisdom than a westernized truth or a westernized way of organizing life. And many of us we're not feeling so home in that type of truths or those type of manuals for navigating life, which I think is also for everyone. Like, I don't think everyone in general feels so extremely, it's amazing all the time. But it's probably easier for us who already feel that we're not 100% belonging here or in our family or context to reach for something else.
Yeah. I mean, this next question probably interplays with that, because you've spoken about the idea that for adoptees, the body often carries both story and rupture. I feel that one. How can therapy, movement, or sexual expression become the site of reclamation for healing or healing?
And and I feel you here as well when you're saying it. It's easy to feel, like it's easy to understand how that feels. And I think just the word rupture makes something like change inside of my chest. Because it's both. Like we have so many things inside us, so many of our stories of part of us that people has like this part is okay and this part is not. Like we can do this, but like this, we don't like this side of you, or like you don't cannot behave like this, or this is not correct, or this is not good, or whatever. And I think it hits differently for us because when can we then be accepted for all of us? When, like, where is that place really? There's somebody will love me unconditionally. Where is that? Because if I translate everything in my upbringing to, okay, this part of me is okay, but this is not, and it is because I'm adopted, then that will shatter me inside. And maybe that's not at all what my parents meant. Not at all. But if that's how I felt, though, repeatedly, then that's going to break some parts of me. however I do it is going to be painful. And trauma is ruptures. Trauma is by definition when we cannot integrate our stories, like when we cannot make meaning out of our experiences, when we cannot carry them. So with that said, how would we carry ourselves and our stories properly with the dignity, with the honor that we have, with the worth that we're coming with into the world, if we're never accepted for both sides or all 4 or 5 sides of our stories, because people think it's complicated, like it doesn't make any sense. And with that, it's so important to acknowledge that we need all of those sides, and we do. And it could be extremely painful and hard work to find them, or to even, have people to accept them. But it's not either or. It's not a contest, If I need to go and find my biological parents, it doesn't mean that I automatically say, you are not my mom, to my mom. And for all, adoptive parents listening, you don't need to take that personal. Like, you don't need to make everything personal about this, because it's probably not. It's both. But you can take a deep breath and you can consider what it means for you personally. But that doesn't mean that what I said or what somebody said is like an attack or is critique or is about you as a person. Like, no, you can let that go and breathe. Because it's not either or, it's both. And it will always be both. And if we're not allowed to have both, then we are stuck in the shadows in between. And that's an impossible place to be in. It's dark, it's like quicksand, we have no idea how to get out. And there is no good way to get out when we're stuck in, you cannot exist in your own way. You have to be in the way that I tell you to be, or in the way that this society tells you to be. How would we know? How can we choose? Like, we're too young and unexperienced to choose until we're like, I don't know, 40, 50. And then, we might not feel that we know how to choose anyway.
Yeah. I mean, it's the most natural thing in the world to want to know where you come from and your story. And I often think when, I've known adoptive parents who are resistant to that and have bred that resistance into, or breathed that resistance into their adoptive children, and they haven't gone searching until maybe after they've died, or not even then. And I think you're denying yourself the opportunity to know your adopted child fully by allowing them to explore and figure out how they are. Like, isn't that the most important part of a parent, to get to know who your child is fully and let them explore? And it's like you said, it's not an either or an or, and it's a natural thing to want to know.
Yeah, I think the fear hits differently, because if my biological child would want to travel the world and not live close to me anymore and so on, that I would be sad, because I would want them to live close. Probably I would, but I might not have this fear, about my role as a mother, that it would be, forever changed or whatever it is. I wouldn't take their wishes or their longings for exploring the world as I failed or I'm not a mom anymore. Because at some point I became a mom if I adopted my children, by signing a paper, by paying for the flight tickets or whatever was going on. And it wasn't a natural process. So I think for a lot of parents, mothers, parents that didn't go through this biological process, then isn't that fear must feel so different in their bodies, because they don't feel necessarily the connection or like that we're together. And then, of course, the reaction might be very different from how my reaction would be. It's still not valid to make it to a personal thing, though. And like, we should not need to wait until our parents die to do our things. We should not. Like, that's not fair, with all the respect for their fear or whatever it is. But like, no, you signed up to be a parent. It sucks sometimes. No, it's like, it's not easy at all. We all signed up for discomfort, anxiety, panic, and feeling that we're worthless as parents from time to time. We signed up for that. Own it. Do your things. We're all in the same boat here. We really don't know what we're doing from time to time. And that's it. Own that, please. Please.
So we spoke earlier about what sort of motivated you to start working in this space. Now I'm kind of keen to know, how has your own research process been personally transformative for you?
It's like every time I speak with an adoptee or adopted parents or around this topic and theme, I feel so, I'm not sure if blessed is the right word, but I'm not religious. So for somebody with a religious background, then maybe that feels different. But for me, it feels like a gift to be able to constantly share and unfold something that I personally have such a strong relationship with, and that I, when I was deciding to write my thesis about international adoptees, and I asked my supervisor, I'm like, did any do this before? Does this make sense? And she's like, does it make sense to you? And I'm like, I don't know. Like, how would I know anything? And I was like, oh, right, wait, actually, I do know it somewhere already. I just couldn't grasp it. So I also feel blessed and humble for my choice to do it anyway, even though nobody really did it before. And it felt like, how will I even do this? How will I motivate this? Like, what is this idea? Or is it just me? Like, is it just me who is constantly dating older white men? And should I just stop doing that? And I'm like, wait, no, that's not making sense again. Like, there is something here. I just don't see it. And I would really like to understand what's going on, though.
Yeah.
But no, it was a very interesting start. Like, do I know what I'm doing at all? No, like, no, I don't. But yeah, no, I feel humble every day. And it feels like a gift every day to talk about something so important, not feeling shame or guilt around it as well, because it makes me free.
I'm glad to hear that. So what advice would you give to adopted people who are beginning to question or explore the intersections of adoption, race, gender, or sexuality?
There is so much to explore here. Like, there's so much to explore. And I would say that it's really important to think about the function it has for you. So if it's dating a specific type of person, if it's a specific type of relationship, if it's a specific type of sexual practice, whatever it is, what function does it have for you? Why are you choosing this right now? What function does it have? It's like, if you have sex with your partner in the morning, that day, this day, whatever, then that sex might have a function of you wanting to feel cuddled, or you want to have, making love, or you want to be close, like you're longing for intimacy. But later that evening, the function of sex might be totally different, because you had a shitty day, your boss sucks, and you are upset, and you just want to really get that out of your body. And the functions is different. In the same day, they can be totally different, and both might be 100% valid. But if you don't know what the function is for you, then how will you choose the right person to share it with? There's so many things can go wrong here. And I want this, and then it's like, this is 100% not how this person shows up, or persons. So I would love for us to have more self-respect and more, focus back on, what does this mean for me? Why am I choosing this? And give ourselves some time to unfold that. And maybe also that, allow yourself to think about what you're choosing. Because if it feels good before you're doing something, you're choosing something, if you're out, for example, you go out and dance and you find somebody and you're like, wow, this person is amazing. Then if you think about spending the night with that person and it feels good, then that's great. But how will you know that it feels good in that time at home with that person or wherever you are? And then you have to figure that out. Like, how will you know if this is a good idea? Like, did you talk enough about boundaries? Are you sober enough? Are you old enough? Are you, all of these different things. But it's also supposed to feel good after. Because, I think everybody has that experience that you just wrap your clothes and you run off, or you're like, oh, shit, how can I do this? Or whatever. But then if you don't know if this will feel good after or not, then maybe it's not the right decision, even though it feels like a great idea at that point. Maybe you should go home and sleep, take this person's number, and call them for a brunch sex tomorrow. And if it feels so extremely good on a Friday 3 a.m., then why wouldn't it feel good on a Saturday 2 p.m.? And it, give yourself some time to think about it like that. Because if we are scared of saying no in that moment, because we might lose it, whatever it was, the attraction, the connection, or the horniness, or whatever it was. But is the fear of rejection something as well, maybe? Or me really wanted to feel chosen, I think, and I'm scared that this person will simply just find somebody else. Then maybe it wasn't for you. Maybe,
Yeah.
And if you still want to choose it, okay, but choose it consciously. Then you know what you're choosing. But then choose consciously. Don't just end up in situations and then you feel shitty about it after.
Yeah, that's it. So much of what we can do is autopiloting through our life, isn't it? Without examining our motivations or what's driving the behavior, and that's where we can run into trouble, is when we're autopiloting, because then it's not always the good things that are motivating that. Yeah. Yeah.
No, and it's okay anyway. Like, you can, whatever it is that you're feeling, it's okay. It's information. But it doesn't mean that it's the right decision to make in that moment. You can make it next week if you like. You can make it tomorrow. But it doesn't mean that you should make this decision exactly right now.
Mm.
And I would love for us to practice more in that, like that capacity to just wait a second. What am I thinking now about how I'm thinking? And what is actually going on? Am I this attracted to this person? Or is that person so attracted to me? And I feel it. And are we going to speak the same language about this when we come home? Or is this, something totally different? And so on, and so on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what about, Anna, for therapists or practitioners, what do you wish more of them understood when working with adopted clients, and particularly transracial adoptees?
I would I would love for professionals in general to stop comparing what we're saying with their ideas around adoption and the narratives about being grateful or how much better it's been or blah, 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 because it's not giving us any justice or any right to explore our true stories if we need to explain to you over and over again how it actually was for us, because we end up in this either or, yes or no, right or wrong situation. If I'm speaking with a therapist and the therapist or counselor or psychologist or whoever it is like, oh, but it's so much better for you when you're here. But that's not being with me. Then they are with themselves in their ideas of me, looking at me, having their gaze at me. It's not building trust. It's not what I need. It's not a healing environment. That's not going to keep me safe. no, do not do that. Stop doing that immediately. Because you are othering that person that you're talking with, and it's not fair. That's not what you're supposed to do in that situation, in your professional, whatever agreement or idea that you have. And I don't think any adoptee or anyone in the world wants to be made an object for you to, look at, or you to unfold in a setting that is supposed to be healing. I cannot think of anyone that I think would feel that that's a healing experience. And if you, as a professional, if you don't feel this, if you don't understand what I'm saying now, or if this upsets you, now that's information for you.
Yeah.
Go home and sit down and breathe and look at that, why that is pissing you off. Do not bring that anywhere until you look at it, because that's on you. That's on you. That's not on us. It's not, I'm not saying anything that is especially whatever. But if my boundaries, or if me asking you for, like, you should ask for consent to make me an object, if that pisses you off, sit with that. Good on you. Have a nice week.
Love it. So what's next for you? What new directions or projects are you currently excited about?
I have so many interesting things. I love what I do. So I'm considering seriously to write a book that has a focus on the experience of selling sexual services, or selling sex, or prostitution, or the transactional sides of sex. Because one of the things that we don't talk so much about is how many adoptees that have that experience, either for somebody else offering them money or something for sexual services, or others who accidentally end up in those type of transactions. And there is so much shame and guilt around that in so many ways. And I still hear those stories. Like, I hear a lot of those stories. So I'm considering that maybe I should write something about that, without, pointing anybody out, without saying that somebody needs to speak their truth or whatever, these things, because that's not for everyone all the time. But from a professional perspective also, how can we explain the different sides of that? Like, is it the longing for melting together, or is it, the lack of boundaries? And of course, it's all of it. Like, it's again, all of the different truths. But that's one thing that I'm excited about.
Yeah, it sounds awesome. Please stay in touch. If that comes out, I'd like to read it.
Yes, I will, of course. And otherwise, I think just continuing to unfold what sexual liberation is, and like, how many different ways is it to heal, and how can we make sure that that reaches, as many people as possible.
Yeah. You're doing fabulous work. And thank you so much for joining us today. You've been an absolute joy to speak to and to get to know as we led up to this. Your openness, your courage, and your clarity is just what we need in this adoption community. And the work you're doing is not just important, but it's really vital. So you're helping to open the doors that many adoptees don't even know that we're allowed to walk through. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
And to our listeners, I encourage you to explore Anna's writing, her platform, The Adopted Sexologist, and we'll put some links in our description under the podcast so that you can find that. There are conversations that we need to, these are conversations, I should say, that we need to keep having about the body, desire, race, and the lived complexity of adoption. And if you're looking for peer support information or just a place to feel heard, Jigsaw Queensland's here for you. And if you have a story that you'd like to tell, just go to our Jigsaw Queensland page, find the podcast section there, and you'll find a prospective guest form that you can fill out and send in to us. And You can support the podcast by listening, sharing, making comments, giving us a rating, and even just letting us know. Like, you can email us at support@jigsawqld.org.au. Let us know what you think about the podcast. We do love to hear from you. So thank you again for tuning in to Adopt Perspective. I'm Jo Sparrow. Take care and bye for now.
Thanks for listening to the Adopt Perspective podcast. If you'd like to find out more, go to the podcast page on www.jigsawqueensland.com and you'll find a wealth of information and resources on the website. If you reside in Queensland, you can reach Jigsaw Queensland's Forced Adoption Support Service on toll-free 1800 21 0313, or you can call Jigsaw on 07 33 58 6666. If you live in another state of Australia, you can still call the Forced Adoption Support Service number and your call will be answered by the Forced Adoption Support Service in the state that you're calling from. In every other state, Relationships Australia operates this service. A big thank you to Matt Sparrow for composing and recording our original theme music. Until next time, I'm Jo Sparrow saying farewell from Adopt Perspective, a podcast for anyone affected by adoption.